Welcome to Leadership from the Cross with Pastor Scott Thom. This broadcast is devoted to taking your ministry and life to the next level. No matter what the level you are at, let us help advance your leadership skills. Leadership from the Cross is a ministry of Cross Christian Fellowship in Albuquerque, New Mexico. And now, Pastor Scott Thom.
Back when I was going to school, I sound like the old grandpa, right? I had great teachers, great instructors, but they're kind of stuck to this rigid format of getting you information that is good. It's a lot of theoretical stuff, but it doesn't necessarily prepare you for what you need. And I wanted to make sure that I didn't give you just this pie in the sky type of thing, that you had this practical bedrock that you could pull back on and have an understanding of, what do I do in this situation? Because they didn't talk about this in eschatology class or Old Testament survey or whatever class it was. They didn't talk about church bullies. What do you mean, church bullies? You don't have bullies in church. Well, yeah, you do. If you're going to be in ministry for any time, you're going to run into church bullies. Now, some of these people, they start off well-meaning. They want to help. They're just not mature in Christ yet. And so they use the same tactics that they had in the world, the same thing that they grew up in, or however they learned it. It carries right over into church life ministry. And they bully people. Sometimes they're known as manipulators. And they can be a real problem in a church. They're not always there. It's not like it's 1 out of every 50 people are this way. But occasionally you're going to have to deal with this. And small church, large church, big ministry, small ministry, doesn't matter. You're going to run into these people who manipulate for selfish reasons. And it could be because of their pet doctrine. And everybody must agree with them. Or they just have authority issues, authority problems. And they've got to dump on everyone else in this situation. Or they feel this is how the ministry should be run. Why aren't you doing it this way? Kind of like Monday morning quarterbacks, right? Well, I would have done it this way. Well, yeah, but you don't have 300-pound lineman running at you, and it looked great from a sky view, but from field view, you couldn't even see that receiver because you have 6'5", 6'7", 300-pound linemen coming at you with their hands up in the air, like they really don't care, and they're trying to kill you, not just tackle you, they're trying to punish you. You have just a few seconds to scan the entire field and make a decision. And do it, and it's so easy to criticize when you're not in the line of fire. Now, this isn't everybody, and not everybody who brings up a criticism to you is a church bully. I'm not saying that. Obviously we check our heart. We make sure that God might be using them to correct us or give us ideas or to help us. And some people come in with a lot of ideas and they just genuinely want to help. But there are those who have an agenda and have a character flaw. So let me give you 10 ways to spot a church bully. When you're in ministry, you're going to run into them. And I'm going to give you these 10 ways. Let me tell you that church bullies don't have just one of these symptoms. They have multiple. Somebody who has one of these symptoms, one of these things that we talk about, that's simple. That's easy. Just love on those people, whatever. But church bullies, you're going to have to love on them, but you may have to deal with them in a different way. Hey, the Apostle John dealt with one just like this. Diotrephes. He wrote about him in 3 John. You probably rarely have ever heard 3 John quoted, right? Well, here we go. 3 John 9 through 11, it says this. I wrote to the church, but Diotrephes, who loves to have preeminence among them, does not receive us. Therefore, if I come, I will call to mind his deeds, which he does, prating against us with malicious words. And not content with that, he himself does not receive the brethren and forbids those who wish to, putting them out of the church. Beloved, do not imitate what is evil, but what is good. He who does good is of God, but he who does evil has not seen God. So church bullies, to identify them, we get this lesson started off by John, and we find out that they'll stand up to you. They have strong personalities. Now, a strong personality doesn't make a person a bully. Not all people with strong personalities are bullies, but all bullies have strong personalities. I love guys like Peter in the New Testament. I love guys who are challenging, who go forward, who think they know things, but they don't, but at least they'll admit it when they don't, and they'll ask for help when they fall. And I would rather have somebody who's charging forward, at least somewhat, than somebody who sits back on their hands and doesn't do anything. So these kind of guys with strong personalities, a little harder to work with, but I love them. But the bully has this kind of dangerous, uncompromising spirit. A bully always has to be right. They take it as an affront to their personhood if they are not right or seen as right. It's an affront to them. It's their identity is wrapped up in this. And they're not easy to train. They don't listen. They know better. This is the type of strong personality you don't want. This is the strong personality that is actually turning into a bully or already is a bully. So number one, they have strong personalities. Number two, they have been through several churches, burning bridges along the way. Diotrephes was one of these individuals. He was burning bridges. Not only did he not allow John to come to his church, anybody who wanted to receive John, he closed the door. Or if they insisted and said, hey, but this guy's an apostle, he was with Jesus, I'd like to have him in my house. Well, if you're going to do that, we're going to kick you out of the church. See, this is somebody who's not a servant leader. They're just a bully. And they will enforce their will if they can. If they are put in leadership, and this is one of the reasons why we're teaching on leadership, and I'm sharing this with you, is these guys work their way into leadership because they know how to get into leadership. And some of you know what I'm talking about. You've been in certain types of churches where they have congregational rule or eldership rule, and these guys tend to work their way onto that platform. They get their seat in the auditorium or their fireplace in the camp, so to speak. I know I'm throwing out a bunch of new metaphors, I'm making them up as I go. But you know what I mean. I'm trying to be kind, but they worm their way in because they really want this authority and they want to impose their will on the church, on the pastor, on the people. And they will burn bridges doing so. They will walk over or step on people to get there and then put those people down and say that it was their fault. They do a lot of church hopping and they leave a wake of damage behind them. And it's always the other church's fault when it's actually mostly their fault. Maybe the church was a little bit at fault, but then they burn the bridges as they go. This is a person who will come in and they'll tell you how much that they didn't like their old church or their old ministry because they kind of are covering their tracks. They did this to me. They did that to me. Now, some people are going to rightly be hurt. But they're going to be those people who come in and you know that they were hurt by their other church, but they admit it, but they just don't want to go into detail about it. They don't want to. Why burn bridges? Why accuse them? It's over with. I've forgiven them. I've moved on. They're doing their thing. We're doing ours. And just let it lie, let it die. But the bully won't let it die. The bully forges ahead. The bully won't let it go, like a bulldog that's got a hold of some chew toy and just won't let it go. And you can tell these people, just let it go. But they don't. So too, they go through churches, church to church, and they burn bridges along the way. They leave a wake of destruction. 3, they're very opinionated. Jude 8 says, likewise also these dreamers defile the flesh, reject authority, and speak evil of dignitaries. A dreamer. What is a dreamer? Is it wrong to dream? No, it's great to dream, to plan, to have dreams, to think through things, and have a executable to-do list and think in the future and think big. That's not what it's talking about. This dreamer is somebody who holds vain or empty opinions or over-exaggerated opinions of themselves or their pet doctrine like we talked about, or how ministry should run, or how you should dress, how you should eat. They come in and they begin to tell you. They think they know, but they really don't. They've never regularly taught, they've never ran a successful ministry, yet they know they're right. They hold these empty or vain opinions because they're not based by practice or reality. And they come and they keep throwing out this thing and this thing and this thing. What about it? Why doesn't the ministry do this? And half the time you're defending yourself. Not in a bad way, like you got to make excuses, but you're trying to explain, this is why we don't do it this way. This is why we have chosen to go this route, because of X, Y, and Z, because we've done this before, or we've grown through this, or we've seen this practiced in other churches and it hasn't worked out very well, but this has, so this is what we do. And these are type of people that they are so opinionated because they want people to agree with them, and they'll tell you their opinion or their argument over and over. And they'll tell other people that to try to sway them, because they want to be right, not just by argument, but by the force of polls. You know what I mean? In other words, if I have enough weight behind me with the opinion of other people in the church, then I can sway the leaders of that ministry, of that church, to get what we want done. But that's not how God's kingdom works. That's not even how truth works. You don't take a poll to find out truth. You do it by what relates to reality, by good, sound, reasonable arguments that by experimentation and by demonstration, you have a proof that this works. Otherwise, you could say, well, all the German people basically agreed with Hitler to kill people. Does that make them murdering people right? No. You don't lead by just taking polls. For example, in the Bible, they came back from the promised land, the 12 spies, and the 10 people got the other people all riled up and say, what are we going to do? Well, we're not going to go into the promised land now. There's giants in the land. So they basically took a poll, rebelled against Moses, and then God made them wander in the desert for 40 years until every one of them dropped dead. Then he moved their children in, because that's not what God wanted. The 2 people wanted to go in, the 10 people didn't want to go in, which were right. Rightness doesn't come about by the number of people you can get to side with you. And that's another reason why these bullies are extremely opinionated and make sure that they go through talking to everybody. And when they don't get their way, they begin to manipulate then. 4, they manipulate people's feelings. You know how kids do this. They pout or they whine or whatever till they get their way. And these type of bullies, then they become bullies because they use a technique called passive-aggressive tactics. It's a technique that basically is it's an indirect expression of hostility. They'll use things like name calling or the blame game. They'll attack your character or your intelligence just to bully a person or bully you into compliance with their thought or their actions or what they want to see going on. I'll give you an example. I had one individual that I wasn't going to allow to teach the kids because his doctrine was just way different from our doctrine. And I said, I know you like the kids and I know you'd like to do that, but you've told me that you're not going to teach what I'm teaching from the pulpit, that you're going to go with your heart and with your gut feelings on these things. Well, then why should I put you in there to teach something that's contrary to the kids, what the parents are hearing from the pulpit? And he was just livid. And he says, if you can't see that I'm a good teacher, then you just don't know what one is. And I was like, okay, yeah, well, see, that's a passive aggressive thing, saying you don't have discernment. You're not a good leader. If you were a good leader, you'd put me in there. If you had discernment, you'd put me in there. So they're attacking your ability. They're attacking your nature. And by intimidating you that way, they can get away with that at work or at other places. Don't let them get away with it in ministry because it's just dumb. Inside, I just kind of let it drop. And I said, well, you're not going to go in, because I didn't want to defend myself. You've never had a church, and you've never led a successful ministry, and you've never planted churches, and you've never taught in a Bible school, let alone kids ministry. And inside of me, I'm thinking, wow, it's something here that I've only been doing this for 30 years and raising up leaders and help plant over 30 churches. And, you can get defensive, but then you get into this whole thing. So I knew not to go there, but what reason I bring that up is because you instantly see that the person is manipulating you with passive-aggressive tactics. And that tells me all the more you don't belong in leadership. Because the scripture says we're not to put people in there that are fighters, pugilists, people who attack people. And this is a big character flaw for leadership. The world uses the same tactic. If you talk about the Bible, Romans chapter 1, you're just homophobic. What does that tell you? That doesn't tell you anything about the argument. That doesn't tell you anything. It's passive aggressive to call you a name to get you to back off. It has nothing to do whether you have a good or sound argument or whether you care about the person or not. Hey, even if the person is homophobic or a bad person, it doesn't mean that they don't still have the best argument. They still may have the best argument saying this is a devastating lifestyle and it's not healthy. It's not good for them. They don't use the same tactics on people who are talking about, hey, you need to quit smoking. You're just a smokophobic, man. Or whatever the term would be, right? But smoking is a devastating lifestyle. And that person may not be the best person to deliver that message, but that doesn't take away from the validity of the message or how truthful the message is or how good of an argument that message is. Let me give you another example. Somebody could be deathly afraid of sharks, but yet they could still be the leading authority on them because they study them, they've written books about them, they've dedicated their whole life to understanding sharks. Doesn't mean that they can't be afraid of sharks. Matter of fact, if you studied your whole life on sharks, you're probably going to be afraid of them, right? But that doesn't mean that you're not an authority on the subject. Therefore, with bullies, you can rarely argue your way to favor with them. A church bully will manipulate the situation. So you can argue with them and they'll try to turn your words and they'll come at you with more of this passive-aggressive tactic. And they'll turn things on you. So you don't dialogue a long time with them. It's not a good use of your time. If they're going to have endless arguments and turn your argument back on you in a sense of, in a passive-aggressive way, instead of actually sitting down and calmly going through the argument, you're rarely going to win a conversation with them. With a church bully, they manipulate people's feelings. You can even make it worse trying to talk to them. So number 5, let's get on with this one. They say they'll submit, but they won't. They don't do it. We just read the scripture says they reject authority. They speak evil of dignitaries, especially when they don't get their way. That's when you know, for sure. It's one of these signs. These signs begin to compound, and they become more and more evidence that this person's a manipulator. They're a church bully. You'll see this in counseling. They'll say, yes, I'm going to listen. Oh, but my wife or my husband, they never listen or whatever. And then you give them what they should be doing, and they argue with you a little bit, and then they'll tell you they're going to do it, but then they don't. They usually end up being the manipulator in the relationship. And they usually are passive-aggressive in what they say. Well, you caused me to lose my temper. See, they blame it on the other person. It's your fault. So they say they're sorry, but then they put the blame on the other person. This is a manipulator. They're passive-aggressive. Man, there's warning signs on these type of people. So they say they'll submit, but they don't. It's like the little boy who was playing around and getting into trouble, and his mom told him to take a time out to sit down. He wouldn't. She goes, sit down. No, he wouldn't. So she used that mama bear's voice. Sit down, and so he sits down, but he tells his mom, I'm sitting on the outside, but I'm standing on the inside. This is what a church bully does. They'll comply for a while. They might do, what you ask them to do, but inside they're seething. Inside they're still rebellious. Inside they want to take the first chance to slam you. And that's number 6. They complain and gossip. Jude continues on. He says in verse 16 that these are grumblers. They're complainers, walking according to their own lusts, their own wants, their own desires, their own things. They don't care about the church, the bigger picture, the bigger thing like that. And they mouth great swelling words, flattering people to gain advantage. If their view is not adopted and implemented, then they begin to erode what is in place by casting doubt on the leadership or the church. They want to cast doubt on the stance the church has taken or their practice that they're doing. Whatever's currently in place they disagree with, they're going to try to erode it away by cutting out the supports, by pulling the rug out from underneath you, because they'll go right to the people and they'll complain and they'll gossip because they're selfish. They don't want to build unity. They'll say they do. They'll complain. They'll use passive aggressive and say, but the leadership, are you the one who's causing the problems? But really they are. And they feel compelled to get people on their side. Again, this is like their identity. It goes back to them always having to be right. So 6, they'll complain and they'll gossip. 7, they frequently tell you how much they love you and how great you are. That seems counterintuitive, right? No, it doesn't. From the scripture we read last time, it says that they'll mouth great swelling words, flattering people to gain an advantage. They come in and they tell you, oh man, you're the best minister ever. You're the best church ever. I'm never going to leave this. Compared you to this other person, you are lights out. And that always bothers me when they begin to actually name names, when they elevate you over another pastor, and it makes you feel good, but it shouldn't, because warning lights should be going on. Don't eat the cheese, because the trap's coming. Romans 16:18 talks about this type of person. It says, for those who are such do not serve our Lord Jesus Christ, but their own belly, their own needs, their own wants, and by smooth words and flattering speech, deceive the hearts of the simple. They're out there, like the snake. And here's the problem. Not everyone will comprehend that that person is a bully. And you're going to have to take action against that person eventually, or rebuke that person or confront them or whatever. And they'll always play the martyr, and you'll always be the bad guy, and nobody will get the full story. And it's not your job to go out and slam them. Just keep your mouth shut, love on the people, love this person, but take your proper action and move forward. And not everybody who complains or tells you nice things is a bully, right? These things have to add up. Many have the gift of exhortation and that sort of thing. But if they are, it will surface. Just like ice clustered in the bottom of your glass rises when enough of it melts. When you get ice put in there and maybe it gets compacted somehow, or it gets put back in the refrigerator, and so it kind of melts a little bit and then refreezes to the exact edge of the glass. So it's kind of like wedged in the bottom of your glass or your cup. And then you pour your drink in there or whatever. And sooner or later, that comes rushing forward when you tip your glass up to drink, because now it's broken loose from the bottom because it's melted enough, and swoosh, gets you in the face, right? That's the way these people come at you. They're nice, and everything, flattering words or whatever, but you, at the right time, boom, sploosh. Their nature and the whole thing comes out. May take a while, may take years, may take months, may take weeks, whatever, but it'll be there. So 7, they frequently tell you how much they love you, how great you are. 8, they esteem others better than themselves. Not. They don't esteem others. They don't think of themselves first. They do think of themselves first. In Philippians 2:3, it says, let nothing be done through selfish ambition or conceit, pride, but in lowliness of mind, let each esteem others better than himself. And these type of people are always thinking about themselves, their comfort, their wants, their desires, everything else. These people are looking to take the situation, use it to their best advantage, always. So one example of this type of person is that they're a terrible listener. They are already compiling their rebuttal to your comments before you finished. Or they don't even wait till you're finished. They cut you off. Or they'll change the subject without any comment on your statement, like, I just don't want to talk about that anymore, because, you don't know what you're talking about or whatever. They just don't care what you just said. They're just terrible listeners. They just have an overinflated opinion of themselves. They will say that they don't, but if you reject what they say, they resent it. Because again, they feel like they're always right. So this is a person, number 8, that they don't esteem others better than themselves. Number 9, they build unhealthy alliances. Birds of a feather. What do? They flock together. People of the same ilk will start studies in your church or in your ministry or whatever, and we're going to meet over here. Is that okay? We meet over here, and they act all innocent, but they're really trying to it's another way of importing their ideas to the people and trying to get as many people on their side as possible. Proverbs 16:5 says this, everyone proud in heart is an abomination to the Lord. Though they join forces, none will go unpunished. They just have this proclivity to find the same type of people and build an alliance to get their thought done, to get their plan done, to get their way implemented. 10, they do most of their toxic work in the dark. 1 John 1:5 says this, this is the message which we have heard from him and declare to you, that God is light, and in him is no darkness at all. When Jesus was brought in, they asked him, what did you teach? Whatever. He goes, you know what I taught? I taught in your villages, and I taught in the open. These things weren't done in a corner. They weren't hidden. They weren't in darkness. But these people that go out and they spur these rumors, they start gossip, they build these unhealthy alliances, they always cloak it. It's behind the scene. Or they give you a different motive or a different thing that they're doing. They don't announce their doctrine. We're just starting a Bible study. We're just starting a worship thing. We're just getting together for fellowship. And then pretty soon they've got their scheme. They're trying to make their own church out of it. They're trying to take people from you. They're trying to do, and they're off. And this is what a manipulator does. This is what a bully does, right? They hide the truth until the time when their plan is so well hatched, they can take advantage of it, or till they get caught. And then once they're caught, oh man, then you've got to deal with it. The worst thing to do is to ignore this problem, to ignore it, think the church is going to be okay, do it. Don't let a church bully loose in your church, in your ministry. Don't put up with it in your business or in your family. If your kids are turning out that way, confront them immediately. What do you do about it? Well, how do you handle it? Well, you start with the least amount of confrontation and progress to more if needed. In other words, you always start off acting in love, giving the person the benefit of the doubt. Maybe they don't comprehend the situation. Maybe if they would be informed enough, they would act accordingly. Maybe they did, but if you confront them, that they'll repent or they'll change their ways. Galatians 6:1, it says, "Brethren, if a man is overtaken in any trespass, you who are spiritual, restore such a one in a spirit of gentleness, considering yourself, lest you also be tempted." So we check our attitude. Make sure that you're bringing another leader or two that can witness these things, and it can also come back and tell you, I think you're a little too harsh, or I'm not sure that's biblical, or whatever it is. Just another check and balance plus a witness in case this person says you said something, because it's another technique they use. The other person can say, well, I was in the room. They didn't say that at all. But here's also another thing. You could approach somebody and, oh no, everything's okay and everything's fine or whatever. And then you find out that they're still doing these things behind your back. Don't sit back. You must escalate the matter quickly. Because if they'll lie to a leader and to the leader's face when you're loving on them and trying to help them, and they blatantly lie to you, then you got to escalate this quickly. Because they've shown that they have a pattern of this and that they continue to be a church bully. So if they're doing this and eventually they're going to be causing some division, then you must continue increasing the discipline by isolating them. Maybe you need to pull them from ministry. Maybe you need to ask them to step down or cut back on their ministry or do whatever, because they need to not be exposed to the people and the people exposed to them. 2 Thessalonians 3:14 and 15, and Paul's writing because Timothy's experiencing some of these same things, man. He says, "And if anyone does not obey our word in this epistle, note that person and do not keep company with him, that he may be ashamed. Yet do not count him as an enemy, but admonish him as a brother." So what is he saying? He's saying you got to pull back. How far do you pull back? Depends on how far they've rebelled. It might be just a little thing. You need to confront it. Maybe tell them, take a sabbatical out of ministry, come back later. But you've got to handle it. Now, if you've removed them from ministry, and here's the thing, and let me just interject this in here, because sometimes we're like, man, I can't remove them from ministry. They're running a special ministry or the biggest ministry or the children's ministry. I don't have somebody else I could throw in. It doesn't matter. You're going to handle it. God's going to handle it. It doesn't matter how vital they are. It will only cause more harm for them to stay. Better to be of a humble spirit with a lowly, God says, than to divide the spoil with the proud. You can get a lot accomplished with the proud and do good or evil, but it's better to take a back seat and be humble and let the Lord handle things than do that. So they continue on this and they're not changing. Then guess what? Number 3, hear of your response. If they continue to rebel after repeated attempts, then ask them to move on. In Titus 3:10-11, it says, reject a divisive man after the first and second admonition, knowing that such a person is warped and sinning, being self-condemned. That you can't reason with them. They're warped. They're against leadership. They're going to cause nothing but division. So it's not saying just separate yourself or come. It says reject them after you've given them a couple times. Or if it's gone completely out of hand, get rid of them. I've actually even had somebody who's an extreme manipulator like this, who has, when I confronted the issue and trying to work something out with that person, and they were being unreasonable and not giving me any reason to try to help them in ministry, but I offered all kinds of helps and here's different ways and scenarios that we could make this happen and work with you. And when they threatened me personally, it was time to go. Time to let them go. Look, you're showing your true color. If you have to win your argument by threatening physical harm, you got to go. You got to go. And I'm not putting up with this, and you shouldn't either. Reject such a man. That's not the only reason, but if they've done these things and caused multiple times to cause division, cause other things, let them go. Move them on. You stand firm. You've got to stand firm. The divisive person's brought it on themselves. Don't let them. They'll cry to everybody and their brother and say that it's all your fault and they're being persecuted. Just let it go. Don't defend yourself or whatever. It isn't long till they show their true color at the next church, and the next church goes, oh my gosh, this guy, we're just another part of their wake as they go from church to church causing problems. So I hate to kind of go through this, but I also am thankful to go through this because I wish somebody had told me and somebody had helped me in leadership. This is true leadership. How do you handle a bully? How do you handle a manipulator on your team? This is it, man. This is how you identify them, and this is how you handle it. And you need to know this because sooner or later in ministry, in leadership, no matter where you are, you're going to get a church bully. And when you do, you'll know how to handle it. So I really hope this helps, and I hope you never have to use this information. But if that's the case, then I hope you're well prepared and well equipped to handle it, to identify a person like this, and to then take the proper steps in moving forward. So what a blessing. All right. Well, Pastor Scott Thom signing off. Blessed wishes until next week.
You have been listening to Leadership from the Cross with Pastor Scott Thom of Cross Christian Fellowship in Albuquerque, New Mexico. Check out Pastor Scott's ministry training school and his other radio show, No Other Doctrine, by visiting our website at crossfellowship.org. That's crossfellowship.org. Also, you can visit our Facebook page at Facebook.com/Leadership from the Cross.